Thank you. And thank you, IJS, and for everyone who showed up today to breathe and to meditate for a bit. It's really a great joy to be back and to be calling in from Israel. So I'm calling in from evening time. So today is the first of a two-parter, which the second part is tomorrow. That me and Rabbi Mark, we spoke a couple weeks back, and we thought this could be awesome to bring from Israel to our online community here. And it's a course that I've taught a longer series, a shorter series for about a year and a half now. And it's a combination of a few factors. So the title of this meditation today and tomorrow is called The Wisdom of Silence, Spring Awakening. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today and tomorrow and go into this guided meditation, it's that today, March 19th, is a combination of a few things. First, it's the spring solstice. So tonight we are transforming from winter into spring. It's also Parsha Vayikra, which is the first Torah portion in the next book of Leviticus. And it's also the week before Purim. So Purim is happening on Monday. So there's a lot of transformations happening, a lot of growth, a lot of death, a lot of birth. And it's a very powerful time to move inwards. And I'm a practicer of Vipassana. If anyone's ever heard, I'm here to share a little bit about the art of Vipassana. And Vipassana, the core of Vipassana is going into a period of silence in order to go deeper in self-observation. So whereas traditional meditation a lot of times brings you in teachings and brings you in mantras, Vipassana is the art of actually taking away from our outer layer, of the period of shedding, period of taking away, similar to what happens in winter as we emerge into spring and allow for a full blossoming. So tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit more about Purim and how all of these topics relate to Purim. But the teaching that I wanted to share today is rooted in this concept in Judaism, which is called itbonanut. So itbonanut is a concept that was invented and has been practiced by sages for many years all around the world. And it's this idea of deep contemplation, almost this idea of a search of, it's rooted in observation. Litbonen, in Hebrew, it means to observe. And so the key piece that we take away from itbonenut is observing not just the self, but observing the patterns of nature in order to connect with a higher source, in order to connect with a divine source, in order to connect with something not just in our physical world, but in our higher world, our higher consciousness. And the way that Judaism as a practice offers us to do that is through the practice of itbonenut. And so me personally, as someone learning the ways of Judaism, learning the ways of the world, I find deep connections between Vipassana, itbonenut, and the spring solstice. And it's a very powerful time to be using these as our roots of our meditation when we're going through a period of transition. So one of the key aspects of itbonenut is that it gives you a sense of silence and a sense of awareness that allows you to go past the first layer of what we see in our reality. And normally when we go into a form of meditation, a lot of times we're waiting for getting to a higher place. We're waiting for that aha moment in our meditation. We're waiting for that moment where, okay, I've reached relaxation. And the commonality between itbonenut and the practices of Vipassana, as someone who's practiced Vipassana a few times now and done a few silent retreats, is you realize that that moment might not be the right goal of what we're trying to achieve. This aha moment of, okay, I made it and I'm peaceful and I am relaxed. A lot of the time that very likely might not happen, and it likely might not be achieved. But what is achieved through that period of silence, through that period of quiet, through that period of observation, is that this physical world, or this non-divine world, the world that is our day-to-day reality, through the practice of sitting and observing, the miracle of this world that we live in every day starts to become riper and more beautiful and more potent and more tangible, more touchable. And so when we go into this practice of Vipassana, what happens when you go through this practice of Vipassana, you can practice for 3 days, for 7 days, for 10 days. Some monks practice for months at a time, is you start to get in peace with this idea that one inner voice, that one inner knowing that many of us are striving to hear and to find and to nurture, is only at the other side of the hill of all of the voices that come in between. And so what do we have to do in order to get to that final voice, that final inner knowing? Is we have to be willing to meet all of those voices in between. And this morning I listened to a teaching of Vipassana, and one sentence stood out, and I said, this is a sentence that's important for me to share, which is, forests precede civilization, deserts come after. It's a teaching, it's a mantra, it's very common in Vipassana. And what does this mean? When you go deeper into it, you understand that what is a forest? A forest is full of life, it's diverse, it's multicultural, it's alive, it's complex, it's an ecosystem. And what's a desert? It's also an ecosystem, but it's much more empty, it's much more quiet, it's much more still. And not just deserts, but there's this process of desertification, if it sounds right in English. And so, what does the sentence mean? Forests precede civilization and deserts come after. It's this idea of how do we allow ourselves to look inwards at the forest that lives within and nurture and go deeper and deeper into the forest that is living within, that's diverse of life, that has mixed experiences, has mixed species living within. We all have a forest that's living within ourselves. And as we go in this solstice from winter into spring, or from any kind of transition from spring into summer or summer into fall, the goal that we're trying to practice through this meditation and through this course is how can we go through that transition with grace? How can we invite the transition and celebrate it and recognize that just like the winter goes through this very predictable cyclical process of not always death, but this long hibernation, how do we also give ourselves that time to hibernate, to rest, to give what needs to be put down for a few months, give it a space in order to come out in the spring and blossom as greatly as we can. But in order for spring to blossom, there needs to be the land, the equinox, not solstice, short. And we need to be tilling the land at all times. We need to be always tilling our garden, also through the winter, also through the summer, also for the spring, in order to make sure that our fruits and our vegetables and our flowers and our trees are ready to blossom at the time that they're here to blossom. So what spring can be called is a time of revealing, is a time of things getting revealed. And in order for things to be revealed, they need to be given the space and the love to do so. And similarly, just like us, in order for us to come out, to break through that first top level, that top soil level, a tiny bud coming out of the top soil, we have to water and nurture our land, our inner forest. And whether it's a big tree that's growing up and it's hundreds of years old, or it's a tiny new bud that's never seen the face of the earth, we have all of those aspects happening inside of us. We have all of those aspects coming out, especially at this moment of the spring equinox, the spring solstice. And so some of our surfaces are much firmer and much harder to permeate. And some parts of us, for that bud to come out, it takes a lot more love and nurturing. And at other parts of us, whether it's love or relationship or our work, we're here to understand and to look a little bit deeper what parts of our inner body is blossoming, what parts of our inner world are flourishing, and what parts need a little bit more extra encouragement in order to break through that surface to come into their moment of spring. Because within everybody, there's a little bit of both. There's something that maybe this past few months or this past season has had a hard time either going to sleep or maybe having a hard time waking up. But we're here to give everything the chance to do so. So we're going to do a little bit of practice of itbonenut. We're going to do a little bit of practice of vipassana through the natural art of silence. And we're going to take a look inside and see what parts of our body right now are needing a little bit extra THC, TLC, tender love and care. So I want to, sorry, not THC. Oops. So I want to invite everybody when the time is right. Everybody's smiling at that. So I see that everybody might have a connection to this. So with that icebreaker, I'm going to invite everybody to move into the part of our meditation, our itbonenut. I invite everybody to close our eyes, relax our shoulders, Maybe lift our right shoulder and our left to feel the energy on both sides of our body. Allowing ourselves to feel comfortable in our chair, feel the place that we need our chair. Placing our hands in our lap, either facing up if we want to receive, or facing down on our legs if we want to ground ourselves. And as we take our first breath in together, invite all of us to set an intention for the rest of our practice. Taking a deep breath in, allowing this breath to fill you, coming in through your nose, up through your forehead, through the crown of your head, moving down through your shoulders, your heart space, your chest. Taking another breath in, allowing that breath to go in through your mouth, all the way down to your belly. Allowing your belly to be filled and nourished. And next breath in, we breathe into our hips, to the place where our upper and lower bodies meet. As we breathe in, we just begin to take note of what came here with us today. What pace is your mind moving? What pace is your heart beating? Can you feel the blood going through your body, giving you life? With our eyes closed, I invite us to release the tension we might be holding in our jaw or in our eyebrows. Release the tension of your face muscles. Unclench your fingers or let your belly out if you've tensed. And on our next deep breath in together, we're going to begin by visualizing our forest. Standing on the edge of our forest, see yourself from the outside. Are you a child or a young adult? A new mom or a new dad? Maybe a new grandma or a new grandpa. And as you take your next breath in, imagine yourself taking one quiet look at the state of your forest. Feel the crispness and the cleanliness of the air filling your nose, filling your lungs. Is it a winter forest in the mountains of a snowy place? Or is it a tropical rainforest with rains covering the surface of your skin? Perhaps it's a forest from your childhood where your imagination blossomed. Or a recently blossoming forest just newly planted. Taking a deep breath in, we invite Itbonanut to fill our entire body. Taking a deep breath in and inviting our consciousness back from wherever it may have wandered. And as we stand on the border of this forest, we take off our shoes, feeling the lushness of the earth beneath us. Lifting our foot in our consciousness just so gently, so it's hovering a little bit above the earth. We breathe in, and on our breath out, imagine that first step connecting into your forest. With each breath, taking one step deeper into this forest, to this ecosystem. Noticing the colors of the trees. Noticing how loud this silence has become. Breathing in, feeling strength from this solitude. And with each step further and deeper, we invite a sense of surrender. We allow ourselves to get lost inside this forest with each step we take. seeing the role that each and every single species has in this jungle. Inviting the sense of wonder that comes through walking alone in nature. The sense of awe that comes by being alone with God in this forest. Finding your breath in this breathtaking moment, we take a breath in through our nose and sigh it out through our mouth. Continuing into our forest, we take note with honor and respect to the health of the plants that live within. In this silence, checking which parts of us are blossoming. How did we bear through this winter? Taking a deep breath in and feeling the soil holding you, hugging you, grounding you. And on our next step in, I invite us to turn our perspective upward to the canopy of the trees. Perhaps a part of our journey that we had completely forgotten to look up. And remembering the wonder of the forest, that on the forest floor, it's full of life, full of weight, full of groundedness. But from the moment we look up, taking a deep breath in, allowing ourselves to feel the wind coming through us, allowing the sun to shine through the leaves and the branches. Allowing light to shine through to our bodies from our head all the way down to our toes. And as we take a few final breaths in with gratitude for this forest, for this journey, for this renewal, we allow all possibilities to blossom within us. Taking a few steps further, coming to the edge of the forest on the other side, renewed, refreshed, and ready. Maybe wiggling our toes or wiggling our fingers. And taking one final deep breath in. And with a sigh, letting it out. Welcome back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you. It's a beautiful sit. I hope you'll be able to stick around in a minute or two. We'll have a chance to reflect and talk a little bit and ask questions. And before we do that, and Kat will be back tomorrow. So if you can't join us, if you can't stay, please do come back, same time, same channel. Before we move to that, though, we do have an opportunity now for anyone who is saying Kaddish, for anyone who's reciting Kaddish or is holding anyone in memory today. You can enter their name in the chat, and we'll also put the text of the Mourner's Kaddish up on the screen. And you're welcome to unmute yourself, and you can join me in reciting the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divra chirutei. I'm not looking. Are people unmuting? It looks like they're not unmuting yet. Hold on. There it is. Be'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei. B'chaye chom u'yomei chom u'b'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'zman kariv v'yitro amen.
Amen.
Ehei Shmei Rabba Melech Le'olam Ve'omayim. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal b'shmei v'kudusha b'richu le'ela milcham birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata amiram ba'al milad b'yorom amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'yisrael amen. Useh shalom b'Olam, Huya aseh shalom aleinu v'al Yisrael v'chol
Amen.
All right. So thank you, everybody. So we'll bring Kat back up here on the screen. And there we go. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I noticed just a few people I noticed are messaging, and they're coming directly to me, and I think you mean to be messaging everyone. So just do double check that you're messaging. If you mean to put it out for the whole chat, just be mindful who you're sending it to, if you want everybody to see it. So thank you so much. That was such a beautiful and rich practice and teaching, and I'd love to invite folks who are in our community here in the chat, just to share anything that resonated with you or came up for you, or questions that you had about the practice. And Kat, what I noticed was that you were really tapping into this moment of the spring equinox and the transition that represents, and the invitation of it that also comes, of course, at the same time as this year's Purim. It always comes around Purim or Pesach, right, for us. And I wonder for you, just if you're able to share some of what that transition, what comes up for you in your own practice, about things from the winter that, as you're moving in, you're trying to bring into the spring or leave behind, or how that transition is for you this year.
Yeah. I don't want to give away too many things of tomorrow, what will be talked about tomorrow, but this winter, as it has been for many of us, has been a particularly difficult one, a one that has, for me, brought way more hibernation than I'm used to in the pace that I live in my life. And there's a whole mix of feelings that I'm carrying with me, which is the guilt of moving forward, like the guilt of actually blossoming into something else, and how to gracefully navigate moving from what has felt like a big period of death, which is resonant with winter and actually appropriate with winter, uh, in a personal way that death has touched my life, and moving into this period of birth and blossoming, and kind of what I tried to bring to this meditation. And I think for me, recognizing that what I mentioned in the beginning, which is there's two pieces. One is what I shared already, which is the garden needs constant tilling, even in the winter. And it's something I didn't recognize growing up, which is I used to think nothing is planted in the winter. Nothing at all gets planted in the winter because it will die. I'm from New York. Uh, and then I worked in farming for a few years. I worked for 4 years in farming all over the world. And I was living in the Amazon jungle, and you're growing all parts of the year. But when I was working in a winter climate, I learned there's something called winter vegetables, that broccoli and cauliflower and all these things actually get planted in the winter. And every season is an opportunity to grow something and to nurture something and to till something. But in the same coin, every season is a time to pick something out and to take something out and to clean the field. So I think for me with this solstice, it's trying to navigate both of those, adding things in and taking things out, and figuring out what do I want to plant and what do I need to take out is actually a super difficult question. And the piece that I actually didn't get to share, but when you look at a forest from the top down, it looks like one thing. It looks like this big green blob that has indecipherable and innavigable, and like you can't even walk through it. But then from the ground, when you're inside a forest, you realize that it's composed of billions and trillions of different species and things. And in Israel, the forests are particularly remarkable, I think. I spend a lot of time in the forests here, and I live now in an area that's very foresty. And I think just allowing myself to do that, come from this bird's eye view of myself, come to sessions like this, teach sessions like this, participate as a student, even though I'm still teaching, participate as a student in sessions like this, because we need to go from the bird's eye view into the on the ground view. But being on the ground, it's intimidating. Going deep, seeing the weeds, it's intimidating to see everything that's going on in the system. And a big feeling standing in the forest is fear. I think I carry that fear a bit. So yeah, I think moving from bird's eye to more detailed view and knowing what you need to get rid of and knowing what you need to plant. It's why we come here to these kinds of sits.
Thank you. There's a few, and there's a couple of questions that came in already. I want to invite us into about one question was looks like Lauren asked the question. She just asked, is this more Hibonanut versus Vipassana? If you want to like sort of if there are threads that you can point to without you
Yeah.
don't have to do a deconstruction, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the wonder of Ippon and Vipassana is it's a bit hard to tell the difference actually, because they're really rooted in the same thing, which is silent observation. Unfortunately, I tend to talk a lot, so I apologize. I didn't give you enough time for silence, maybe, but this practice, I would say, is we're also in the Institute of Jewish Spirituality, so I wanted to bring a bit more Itbonanut than the Vipassana, but both of them have the same idea that when you go into silence or go into the forest or go to observe nature, or go to have that moment of quiet, what happens many of times is it gets very loud in our heads, and suddenly there might be quiet around us, but there's a lot of noise within. And that's shared both in Vipassana and both in Itbonanut. But both practices, the reason I connect with them is they're very connected to the physical reality. And they're both very rooted in this concept that, from what I've understood, looking for God or looking for divinity or looking for higher consciousness, it doesn't come from just like, disconnecting from this world. It comes through this world. Dafka, there's a term in Hebrew actually like opposite. It comes through going through this world, going deeper in this world, connecting with nature, connecting with yourselves, connecting with these voices in our head in order to reach a divine connection. And that, I think I spent a lot of time not understanding that, like looking for godliness and religion and this deep connection without really getting connected here on this earth. So I think It was more focused in itbonenut and vipassana. There's more silence, but they're both rooted in the same
Mm.
idea.
I think that that also goes to a question that was here about, are you suggesting that the forest contains cultural mores, our place in the world, that we need to go through on our way to the desert where we find our still small voice? And one of the things that that came up for me as you were just speaking was thinking about, the nighttime in both of those locations is very different. The night in the forest, good luck sleeping. It's really noisy. There's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of things that make a lot of noise if you ever go, camping out in the woods. And it can be a pretty noisy time. Versus if you're in the desert, can be much more quiet, right? You don't have that volume that's happening. Um, and I didn't hear what you were saying so much as like you're going through one to get to the other, but that these almost live as two different, they're two different milieus that we might find ourselves in, and that we contain, both of them at different times, or they might be more emphasized one time versus another time. I'm not sure if that, if that resonates with what you were getting at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Um, And certainly I've found in my own practice lately, right? Just sometimes you have those, you have more, I tend to sit in the mornings, but like I have mornings where it's really hard to get my mind to quiet down and to be still. And so you just embrace, okay, guess what? I'm noticing that it's noisy today. It's like, all right, that's what it is. There's a lot of noise in the forest today. And some other days it can be, it's easier to drop into a silent place, and both of them have their value. That it's not about avoiding or resisting one or the other in favor of the other,
Totally.
necessarily. So,
It's
um,
it's a teaching that I've been actually focusing very deeply on, which is how we can incorporate nature into Jewish studies. It's something I really connect with in terms of Judaism. A lot of times people ask me, do you feel Israeli? And I make a joke and I say, no, I feel a Kanani, like I'm from Canaan, because we come from very deep connection to nature. And I think something that is such a benefit of living, for me at least in Israel, is that when we talk about these natural wonders, forests and deserts, traditionally it's been known in Israel and in Judaism and in different kinds of teaching that you go north for like illumination and enlightenment, and you go south for cleansing and to kind of like clean out everything from your sphere. And in Israel, north is forest and green, and south is desert, this kind of quiet emptiness. And I feel really connected to that, that how do we find places in our world that we can go find our places where illumination is more sparked? Like when I'm in the forest, ideas come to me like, and when I'm in the desert, things really do start to clean and get more revealed. Like the knowing that's already there is shown versus when I go to the forest, new things are added. So it's just interesting, even if you live in a place that doesn't maybe have a desert close to you, finding places where there's that quiet, where it's like an empty space that you can go to for recluse.
mhm, mhm. And I also want to give a plug for noise canceling headphones. That can also can get you part of the way. So yeah. Um, yeah. So okay. Um, wonderful. I'm just looking if there are other questions that are coming up. I see here that Steve says, you led me back to my 40 days of silence 24 years ago. The noisy world of gradually fading away, only to find the noise inside. Wow. Okay. Would love to hear more about that, Steve. Shimon. Beautiful. Yeah. And Cheryl here noting a wide open space like a long beach and lots of sky to be one of those desert places. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Yeah. And of course, the desert plays such a role, right, in our story in terms of, in the Torah. The forest less so, right? It's interesting. Like we don't get as much of that imagery quite, but okay, 14. Okay. Thanks. We got it. Noted. But yeah, the notion of the wilderness, um not necessarily the desert, but but the wilderness, which is desert in that context. So it's really something. I wonder if you just want to, reflect a little more on maybe in contemporary Israel, the place that the forest maybe it plays more, right? We get more of that treatment now, maybe than we do at least in the Torah of the stories that we read.
Yeah, I think one of the most practical presentations of that I wanted to bring up the meditation, but I thought it would be a bit distracting. I don't know if anyone has ever done this, but like you plant a tree in honor of someone's life in Israel, and you can like do the 18 or $36. I don't know how much it is, but you plant a tree in Israel, and it's sort of like, let's bring life to this country. Let's through death find life. And I think for me, the forest is like this most accurate representation, and it's what we're going through in this moment. That's the spring solstice or equinox. Sorry, I'm actually not sure what the difference is, so I'd love a understanding. Um, which is I was just on a trip a few days ago through the forest in Jerusalem, and you see these massive tree trunks that have died, probably fallen and died maybe 10, 15 months ago, or maybe even a year, 2, 3 years ago. And the amount of life that's concentrated inside this dead tree trunk is the reason that the ecosystem keeps going, and eventually it will completely disintegrate, become the soil, and from that become earth again. And how can we incorporate that into our bodies in the seasons? How can I eat differently and meditate differently and pray differently? And maybe what will connect me to spirituality in the winter is really different than what will connect me to spirituality in the summer. And I read a quote this morning that I loved, which was, "Our world is the most beautiful because it pushes us to grow." That's what's unique to us. Like the reason that this world is so beautiful is because of its imperfections and because it's always pushing us to grow. And growth is the thing that creates hope. And hope is a uniquely human thing. Like animals don't have hope. Like a lion isn't sitting and thinking, "Oh, I hope I'm going to find food later." He's just going to do it. And that this concept of hope comes through the seasons and the solstices. And I'm like that this day, it's really a time of hope and awakening and replanting. Oh,
Well,
hey,
thank you, Kat. This is it's beautiful. And it's really prompted a lot of wonderful things here. And thanks, Yael, for the note from Google. Yeah, and lots of things that we can say about forests, obviously, that's coming up. So thank you, everybody. Good news is that you'll be back tomorrow to do part 2 of this. So I really invite everybody to join us again tomorrow at the same time. And if you can't, this, of course, is always available on YouTube. And I have a feeling that this will also be going on our podcast too, Jewish Meditation for Everyone. So thank you so much, Kat. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And we'll see you again tomorrow.
thank
Okay,
you so much.
thanks.